Christian and Brad Miller from Reactant Media. We are here
Hey,
with my dear friend, Ben Courson. He is the founder of Hope Generation, a TV show that airs in over 180 countries. He's a writer, a speaker, a pastor, definitely a social media influencer. And Ben, you wear so many hats. So I just want to say thank you for carving out some time for us, Ben. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much, man.
yeah, thanks for being
Stephen,
here.
I love you so much, dude. It's crazy because I think, if I remember, Stephen, you used to tour with my brother-in-law at 7 Places, or at least you might have played a show with them once or something. Am I getting this right?
We did here and there. We did our first radio tour with them. It was awesome, man.
Yes. And then me and you became friends at Calvary, Albuquerque in New Mexico. And we just hit it off quick, dude. We got a team up there. And so I'm glad we've continued this friendship for a few years. And I think our best days are yet in front of us, dude. And I'm stoked to be a part of this.
I am too, man. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for joining, Ben. I'd love to know more about you. Just for people listening in, just tell us who Ben is. What's your why? What are you doing these days?
Yeah, I love that old German metaphysician quote about existence that goes, "He who has a why can overcome any how." And for me, like the book Lamentations in the Bible, the word literally means how. And this guy's watching Jerusalem get sacked by its enemies, and he says, how? And then he writes this book, Lamentations literally means how. And actually, the Jews will gather in synagogues together once a year. They'll read the book of Lamentations, and they'll talk about all the stuff they lost in the past year as sort of a psychological, cathartic, therapeutic outlet for all their grief. And so that's where like the idea of Lamentations comes from, this idea of how. And for me, like, he who has a why can overcome any how. Like, I've gone through a lot of how am I going to get through this in my life with, just I'm going to hit it deep right off the bat. But my sister passed away in a car accident. My brother died of cancer. I got diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, was suicidally depressed for 10 years, went through a romantic heartbreak after an 8-year relationship. I have this crazy guy literally follow me and my dad everywhere I go speak, picketing and calling news stations, and it's crazy. And I just went through so much despair over everything that I started to feel like life wasn't worth living. And like Viktor Frankl said, we have means but no meaning, enough to live by but not enough to live for. And so so my why, to answer your question, that overcomes the how. Like, how could I get through this? Like, how could all this bad stuff have happened in my life? My why is simply this: I want to give the world hope. That's why I wake up in the morning. That's why I do what I do. That's why I'm like so driven for this mission, is because it's a simplicity after complexity. My why, my one idea and sticky ideal, is to give the world hope, and that's why I wake up in the morning, period.
Awesome. That's
That
awesome.
is so incredible, man. That is because not a lot of people would just know their why right off the bat. It just seems like
Right.
That's so intriguing. And you keep mentioning the same word over and over again, which I love, because again, when you find your why, you kind of stick to that purpose, that minute. And so you keep saying the word hope. So tell me, how did the Hope Generation come to be? Obviously that's your why, but tell us, like, dive deeper into that.
Yeah, so actually Hope Generation started sort of accidentally, in the sense of somebody called me from Washington and said, hey, do you want to start a radio show? And I said, sure. And we needed a name, so we called it Hope Generation. So it literally just started out with 2 radio stations, and now it's, I think, on like 412 radio stations.
Wow.
So it's pretty crazy just to see that grow really quick. But it started because we wanted, and then it turned into a TV show and all of that in social media. But for me, like, hope is a very beautiful, beatific, transcendent idea. And I think it's misused a lot of times in American culture in regards to sort of diametrically opposed to how I use it. And this is what I mean. Like, people say, I hope Selena Gomez asks me on a date, or I hope I win the lottery, or I hope this 99-yard Hail Mary pass connects with the wide receiver. But that's not the way the Bible uses the word hope. Like, I love the even if somebody listening isn't into the Bible or whatever, what's really cool is the concept of hope in the Bible. Like in the Old Testament, the word hope means knitted in Hebrew, because our hope is knitted to the prime mover, to the source, to the mystery, to ultimate reality, which means that even when our circumstances unravel, our hope never does, because it's knitted. It's
Wow.
knitted to something greater. It's knitted to something stronger. The Bible calls it an anchor for the soul. So I believe my hope doesn't have to be dictated by my circumstances, but my circumstances can be dictated by my hope. And then in the New Testament, the word for hope in Greek is elpis, and it literally means joyful, confident welcome. So for me, this whole hope message has to do with becoming more joyful. Like, you can't put a glass ceiling on joy. I've never met someone and said, gosh, I wish they were a little more grumpy and gossipy. Like, you can't have too much joy. So the average adult laughs 13 to 17 times a day, and the average kid laughs 200 to 400 times a day. And
Wow.
my goal is to get people to be more crazy, more childlike, more sendy, more adventurous, like friend ventures with God and squad. Like, we should be joyful. Just because we get older doesn't mean we can't be childlike in our faith. So I like the next one. In Greek, the word elpis means confident. And I don't know if you've ever read Kanye's tweets, but they used to be crazy. Like, he said, you may be talented, but you're not Kanye West. He's like, I may not be tall and skinny, but I'll settle for being the greatest artist of all time as a consolation. He said, I wish I had a friend like me. And he tweeted, I believe in surrounding myself with winners, which is why my room is full of mirrors. So like, when I think of confidence, I think of, okay, there's a guy who's sure of himself. But there's this crazy passage in the Bible where Numbers 12:3 says Moses was the most humble man on the face of the earth. But what people forget is Moses wrote that verse. So Moses was speaking in the third person like athletes and rappers. And he's like, Moses is the most humble guy ever.
Wow.
But if God told him to write that and speak that about himself, then that was the most humble thing you could do, is meekly submit to what the divine spoke over him. And so I want people to, in an age and era and epoch of identity crisis, to find their confidence again, that we are like, we're not a carbon footprint. We're a force to be reckoned with. We're not just protons. We're a pronoun. We're not a lost cause or orphans. We're children of the Most High. And so I think that joyful confidence helps us to welcome in all these miracles that God wants to give to us. And so that's kind of my understanding of the word hope. It's joyful, confident welcome knitted to the ultimate reality.
That's really awesome. I mean, right now, I think we need that the most, right? A lot of people are seeing this today, and I think we'll get into that in our conversation, but I'm curious to know more about like your books. Because I mean, just listening to you talk, there's an inspiration there. Something's there. And I'm curious to know where does your inspiration come from? Not just from God, but I'm curious to know. Tell us more about where the books go. How does that come to be?
Yeah, so my latest book that just came out is called Optimisfits, and it's a combination and amalgamation etymologically of the idea optimist and misfit. And honestly, dude, what got me out of depression, one of the main things, was not deep conversations or existential navel gazing. What it was is crazy friends who grabbed their skateboards, didn't talk to me about all the pain and suffering in the world, but just showed me that life could be fun again. Yeah. Like to me, fun is such a big deal. I think it gets a bad rap as being like, skimming the surface, when to me, fun can plumb the deeps. Like, if I'm going to be on this planet, this mode of dust hurling through a sunbeam at 67,000 miles per hour, and when I'm on an airplane, I'm double flying because this rock is flying through space. And then if I'm on an airplane, which I'll be on tomorrow, I'm doubly flying, This thing is wonderful. This thing is mysterious. This thing is magical. This thing should be fun. And so I went on all these adventures with my friends when we were filming for our TV show. Like, we went to France and Italy, and we went to England and New York, and just all over the place to have these amazing adventures. And I kind of wrote that book as sort of the muse and inspiration for that book was these friend ventures I had with just a bunch of crazy friends who showed me that life can be fun again. And now it makes sense why, like, Harry Firestone, Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, they all had summer homes together in Florida. You guys are in Florida. So right. They all had their summer homes together in Florida because they knew that those who live in a dreamality, those who are visionaries in Dreamcast, they need to get around other visionaries, other people who Dreamcast, because that affects you so much. Like, if you run with skunks, you're going to smell like one. But because you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, I try to get around those people who bring me fun, who bring me joy, but fun with a purpose and joy with meaning. And then that's kind of, so Optimisfits tells that story of those adventures.
Very cool. Yeah. We'll link to that in our description, by the way, whoever's listening.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So your writing style, especially there in that book, Optimisfits, reminds me so much of your speaking style. You know, like when I see you on stage and you're in the passion and the vernacular, and you transcribed it so well, you transpose it so well into your literature, into your writing. Like, how did you come up with the concept of that? Was it just kind of like the overflow of your heart, so the mouth speaks, and you just said it? I mean, did you listen to your your sermons and you transpose? Like, how did you? That's the way that you write, the way that I read it is unlike any author I have ever read before. That's a sheer compliment. I've never read anything with that tonality. And I'm sure you hear that all the time. But how did you come up with that? What was the inspiration for that?
Well, first of all, it's sick, Stephen, because usually you've been on the other end of interviews with your band in Berlin and all that stuff, like, and your solo stuff. And so, first of all, you guys are really good interlocutors and investigative journalists, makeshift minds, you know. But yeah, for it's cool because you're in that book. You're in one of the first pages because you wrote a little blurb for it, which I'm so thankful for. The way that the writing process worked for that was, honestly, to be totally honest, I get my life and I'm single, I'm by myself, so I don't have any responsibilities or like attached to anything. So I can literally just spend all my time in book world, like reading, writing, and then going on adventures and filming it. So that book, I didn't necessarily have to like look back at sermons. I just had a lot of it in my heart and in my head, just because I'm constantly marinating in content and I'm constantly like wanting to go to I love dead. I know that sounds cliche, but I love dead authors, you know, like Halcyon Days of Eld and, you know, sort of those times of yore, those romantic times of centuries ago. And so I kind of like compiled all of this content that I had put my head into and then just unleashed it onto the page. But I love what Stephen King says about writing. He says the great commandment for writers is read a lot, write a lot. And he said read and write for 4 to 6 hours a day. And that kind of goes in conjunction with the book Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, where he talks about like the Beatles with the British invasion, coming on the Ed Sullivan show, and these 4, you know, mop-topped it boys with the X Factor from England come to America and they take the United States by storm. He talked about Bobby Fischer, Bill Joy, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, hockey players, master criminals, pianists. He talks about musicians, and he studied what is the common denominator that all these greats have in common when it comes to their craft. And he found that they had all practiced for 10,000 hours. So that means 4 hours a day, 5 days a week for 10 years, or you can do 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for 5 years. So Stephen, I literally took out a timer. I had multiple timers, and I timed myself with reading, writing, and preaching. And I did 11,073 hours in 5 years. So after I did that, then I started writing Optimisfits. So I just had an overflow of information. So it wasn't so much how did I come up with it. It was more like I had so much. How did I cut it out of the onto the editing floor? You should see how much stuff got deleted. It was much longer initially.
Well, to the writing, it's interesting you say that because when you say cutting, they say a lot of writing is you do a lot of editing more than anything. Like you'll write from your heart, and it's like the tons of editing comes out of that. So you probably still have some more stuff coming, I'm sure.
Yeah, I do. And it's been said, a book is only as good as the scraps that are left on the cutting room floor. So the idea is like, kill your darlings is that classic phrase. Like, you're like, you don't want to let go of it, but my editor's like, we're making this short. We live in a generation with, and literally our attention span psychologically is less than that of a goldfish. And so we have to keep it short because the mind can only absorb what the seat can endure.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yep, that's great. So you are actively doing speaking engagements online. You know, I see it. You have a list of a bunch of stuff that's happening. You're speaking for different churches, different places, and it seems like you've adapted to the current situation with the uttermost ease. So what advice would you give? Because I understand, and I mean, you are a man of God, you are, you're a speaker, you're an orator, you're a Christian author, that's incredible. But also you're a businessman. In all that, you have to know your schedule, your planning, purpose, all these other things that I would say is more the industry. Like if you have music industry, there's music, but you have to have the industry to complete your job. So so you seem to take what you do, the passions that you've created, and you've adapted it to the current situation with ease. So what advice would you give or to encourage a small business owner, an entrepreneur, or perhaps a church, a small church in
Yeah.
this time of crisis?
Yeah, I would say that while the world is on pause, we should press play. And let me give you an example of what I mean. I want to use like a sort of literate example and then a biblical example to reach both just the small business owner and somebody running a small church. For the small business owner, I'd say this. In the year 1606, there was a plague that spread throughout England. And William Shakespeare had to self-quarantine. And he was literally stuck in his home while this pandemic was spreading throughout England. While he was locked in his home in self-quarantine, he wrote Macbeth, Antony and Cleopatra, and he wrote King Lear. So he wrote all three of those plays while he was in quarantine because of a disease. So I think a lot of people are saying, man, I can't work, like the world's on pause. Actually, if you learn to be resourceful, if you do the most with the little you have, you can actually produce some of your best work because you're not distracted. And while everyone else is on pause, if you want to press play, you can actually get ahead. When it comes to the biblical world, I want to tell people, what did Paul do when he was in quarantine? He was in quarantine in a prison, and he wrote Philippians, Ephesians, Philemon, and Colossians all in one bout. So if these guys are doing that in quarantine, let's go to the musical world. There was a guy who released his first #1 single in his entire career. It was his first #1 as far as a song that he himself wrote and performed. He's 78 years old. He just came out with, during the coronavirus a few weeks ago, his first #1 hit, and that guy's name is Bob Dylan. In Bob Dylan's entire career, he wrote Gone with the Wind, but he didn't perform it. As far as a song that he himself wrote and performed, he came out with his first #1 hit in his entire career, literally a few weeks ago during the coronavirus.
Wow.
So if Bob Dylan's coming out with his first #1 hit as a 78-year-old, if Shakespeare's writing Macbeth, King Lear, and Antony and Cleopatra, and if Paul's writing Philemon, Ephesians, Philippians, and Colossians all in one bout, then that makes me say, what am I doing? While the world's pressing pause, I'm going to press play and be productive.
That's awesome. So I have to understand this as well. So what do you do to escape the stress? Like, do you, like, even just with work and everything that's going on, I'm curious to know, how does Ben relax? Because you have a lot of hats that you wear, right? So there's a lot going on. So I'm curious to know if you could share maybe some advice to speakers, writers, entrepreneurs. How do you stay healthy? I mean, just in general, just a healthy mindset from a stressful time that this is.
Yeah, one of the things that's really good is science shows us that a 40-minute jog has the same effect on the brain as antidepressants. So when you release endorphins in your brain through sweating it out, a lot of times what happens with driven people is, I always picture driven people as super fit, super in shape. But what can happen is, if you're like a workaholic and you're so into your craft, you can sometimes like let even the healthy diet or the exercise go. I know that can happen to me. And so I need to like take time out of my day to say, I got to let my body sweat. And you can feel your stress, like sweating out your stress. I like to literally a week ago, I ran up a mountain and down, and I felt so much better, because there is something for those entrepreneurs and business people and diligent workers and industrious people out there. Like, you're so absorbed in your craft that to get your mind off it, put in some good tunes in your earphones, go for a run. Another thing I love to do is I love to hot tub. I love to sauna. I love Epsom salt baths. If I'm going to get real practical, hot, cold showers are huge. Like, if you're feeling kind of lethargic and stressed out, take the cold, unless you have cardiovascular predispositions, then you're not supposed to. But other than that, like, you take super cold showers, then you turn it super hot, then super cold, then super hot. It's amazing at increasing your circulation. Another thing is trying to avoid serotonin overflow, like breads, pastas, certain kinds of cookies that have serotonin, feel-good pleasure benefits that dissipate within 20 minutes. So I think it's making smart decisions with lifestyle choices that help. And then to get real simple with it, spending time and investing time with like my niece and nephew. They're 3 years old and 5 years old, and just like being crazy with them and listening to them talk about utter nonsense, which is the true wisdom of the world. Like that kind of gets my mind back in healthier places and spaces.
That's awesome.
Yeah, you
That's
mentioned
awesome.
good tunes. So tell us, I mean, I'm always looking for new music. What is on your playlist right now? What are you listening to?
Oh, well, actually, okay, what have I listen to a lot of soundtracks, which sounds funny. So,
No, that's good. That's awesome.
The Steve Jobs soundtrack by Daniel Pemberton's really
That's a good
good.
one.
I like Tron Legacy
Oh,
soundtrack by
that's a great
Daft
one.
Punk. I think that's the greatest soundtrack ever. There's some post-hardcore songs by Dance Gavin Dance that I really like. Was listening to Amberlin the other day, my friend Kellen Sigmund Sirens. Um, I always love the good old John Mayer. It's so timeless, you know, it always calms me down. Um, Dave Matthews Band, he's the best drummer in the world, Carter Beauford. They're geniuses at spontaneity, especially their live stuff. And then just as boring as this sounds, I'll always love Coldplay. So there's a few bangers and jams on my iPhone.
So you were mentioning Trailer. Have you listened to the Oblivion soundtrack from
Dude,
'83?
oh gosh,
That's
you're
a good
getting me
one.
so pumped right now.
That's
Literally, the house that I'm filming this from my house. I just moved in here a few months ago, and we designed it after really. The architecture is designed after Oblivion, the Oblivion house.
really
Like I wanted to make it as close to that as possible. And the soundtrack, dude, Waking Up, that song Waking Up, if
Isn't
you
that
want to stay
awesome?
focused through your day,
Yeah,
that will. And by the way, can I say a fun little fact about the power of music?
sure.
The reason you'll never meet someone who says, I hate music. Now, you might not like Indian sitars, you might not like rap, you might not like pop. It's been said pop musicians play 3 chords for 1,000 people, jazz musicians play 1,000 chords for 3 people. I don't know if that's true, but I've heard that said. I'm not a musician. But what's interesting is the reason everybody likes music is because all of music, even classical, is built on a rhythm and it's built on a beat. And your prefrontal cortex in your brain loves to make predictions and be right. So every time you're clapping your hands, like, you know how you clap or dance a little bit or tap your toes without even being aware of it? It's because your prefrontal cortex loves to make predictions and be right. So it's predicting the upcoming rhythm or beat of a song. And therefore you're clapping or dancing or tapping your toes or snapping your fingers to successfully celebrate your own prediction, your own successful prediction of the upcoming rhythm. So you're like celebrating your own prefrontal cortex's ability to successfully predict what's coming next. So that's why we all love music.
I love it. So in church, when we're all clapping, we're actually clapping for ourselves. Like, good job.
Yes, yeah. I know, dude. I think about that all the time. We're like, I can go on time. You know what I mean? I'm on beat. So that's kind of the science behind it. But yeah, all those jams are just so good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Well, Ben, this has been really, really great. We don't want to take all your time up, but we really do appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. How can people connect? How can they follow your content? What should we give them?
Yeah, so you can just literally type in Hope Generation on Google and you'll find all my stuff there, or my website, bencourson.com. You go to YouTube, type in Hope Generation. It's also on 20 different TV networks and the radio and Instagram. You can just type in Hope Generation, or Facebook or Twitter or whatever your vibe is. And I'd love to connect with you guys.
Awesome.
Yeah. And then finally, in closing, like, what your modeling career? Like, what's your next campaign? Is it Gucci? Is it Louis Vuitton? What was it?
I'm actually thinking about modeling Louis Vuitton purses. That's kind of the next.
Perfect.
That's kind of the next gig I'm thinking about booking.
Whatever it is, I'm buying. Whatever you're sporting.
How fast can you have your bags packed from Milan?
Oh gosh, well, it's funny because I went to high school in Orange County, and the purses the girls at my school had, they were like hundreds of dollars. So I come out of that world not of having purses, but the Louis Vuitton world, and it's nuts.
That's incredible, man. Well, hey, Ben, thank you so much for being with us, man. What a privilege, what an honor. This has been so cool. Thank you so much.
I love you guys so much. Let's do it again. I know we're living in crazy times of crisis, but let's do it again. Let's hang out more, and let's keep spreading that hope like you guys are doing. I really love you guys, and I can't wait to hang again.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben.
See you guys.
All right, see ya.